Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and last week, one of the stranger things and one of the most awesome things I've ever experienced happened to me at a dinner. So I'm at Mission in West Seattle. It's my favorite Seattle Mexican restaurant. It's got a really cool vibe, the food is great, and I know the owner a little bit. But that's not why I'm telling you this story. So I'm sitting at a bar table, and I'm talking to my wife, Ange, and in a split second, out of the corner of my eye, I see something that pretty much lands in my hand. And before I knew it, I was holding something, and it was like someone meant to throw whatever I was holding right into my hand. And it's a good thing it landed where it did, because when I look at it, it's a sealed glass container from the weed store with a joint in it. If I didn't catch it, it would have exploded all over the ground and created a big scene in this restaurant. But the way this thing landed, it couldn't have been an accident. There had to have been someone at the restaurant that I knew. So I get up, I walk around the bar, and no one I know is there. So I'm totally confused. I look up and I notice that there's some tables upstairs. So I deduct that the glass-encased joint had to have fallen out of someone's pocket and landed directly in my hand, like a sign from God. It was so crazy. And since I don't put any smoke in my lungs these days, I was like, Ange, I'm going to go return this joint to them. So I'm about to walk upstairs and deliver the now legal goods when I realized that my plan to go up to a group of strangers and ask them if they dropped their weed on me was an odd one. I mean, what if there was a kid at the table? I'm not going to go sell out any parents in front of their kid. Or what if I went up and it didn't belong to anyone in that group? I would feel so dumb. So I decided against being a good Samaritan that night. And I've mentioned this before, but I tried to be a good Samaritan with weed once before in my past, and I will forever regret that decision. See, I was in Canada, and I had a little weed left over in like 2000 or 2001. And if my kid happens to be listening to this, that was 25 years ago, and I was an adult. And if you want to smoke weed, wait until you're in your 20s when your brain is fully developed. But anyways, back to my story. I had some leftover weed, it's like 2002, and I'm at the last gas station in Canada. My friend is driving and she's like, hey, you need to get rid of that weed at the gas station. So I do what any cool person would do. I found a car with the back window cracked open and I dropped the bag of weed into it. When I get back to the car, my friend's like, what do you do with the weed? And I told her, I put it in the back seat of that car over there. She was like, you are such an idiot. That car is filling up with gas right now and they're heading to the US border. Pretty much every car at that gas station was doing the same thing. And while I have no idea what happened there, I still feel bad for the issues that I could have caused for that person, and I'm really sorry about that. But anyways, back to dinner. We finish our meal. We decide to keep the joint. I mean, my wife does have cancer, and weed's great for that. So all in all, that was a pretty random experience. And you know what else I'm finding random these days? Is all these social media brands out there. We've all seen it with goggles. There's like 100 different goggle brands out there. Some Amazon-based, some social media-based, like Blenders, and they have crushed it over the past few years. I'm sure the legacy goggle brands are pissed and they're taking a hit. But now it's outerwear, and there are two brands that I constantly see out there, and I'm not going to name them. But the outerwear is everywhere, and it has to piss all of the legacy outerwear brands off. One brand is marketed to the younger generation, and the rest of it seems to be marketed towards the Blake and Scott Schmidt era skier. And it's working. Like I said, I see this shit everywhere. And really, the legacy brands should be taking notice, as the internet brands are going to take over everything, I feel like. The ones who do it best will be like J Skis, cutting out the middleman in favor of increased profit margin for the brand and increased value for the customer, all while still supporting great things in the sport. Unfortunately, most of these brands won't be like J Skis. They're just going to take the money and run because it's worked so far. I mean, really, if you want to be part of this industry, other than just being a consumer, find a product category that doesn't have a big online player in it. Then undercut the legacy brand's pricing structure in that category, and you have a proven model for success. But I'm totally kidding. I don't want any of you to do this, and I'm going to continue to support the legacy brands as they are truly better. I just wish the new guys would innovate, or at least put some money back into the sport. You know, maybe even sponsor my guest this week, the incredibly amazing Rachael Burks. Rachael is known for going bigger than most people out there, sending herself in a way like her idol Seth Morrison did. But the way Rachael did it was totally different than Seth. She didn't even get serious about skiing until moving out of Texas in her 20s. And from there, with the help of Billy Poole and Julian Carr, Rachael's career exploded. I will say, that out of all the people I've met in the ski business, Rachael is the most stoked and fired up person, and you can tell that from her passion and laughter throughout the podcast. They don't make too many like Rachael Burks. Before we get into it, I want to ask you to tell a friend about the show and to rate me on iTunes. Both of these things really do help the show grow. I really appreciate you doing these things for me. And finally, I want you to support the amazing brands that make this podcast happen. They are Stanley, Elon Skis, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and Best Day Brewing. Now, let's talk to Rachael Burks. So I was going to start the podcast with how we met, skiing and drinking pisco in La Parva, Chile. I would see you every summer. It seemed like it was you and Drew Tabke and Ian McIntosh, and you guys were dirtbagging it there. And I wanted to talk about that when you guys were frothing to make your pro ski careers happen. But then you go ahead and win the Wildest Adventure Award for your latest project, Going Greenland, at the No Man's Land Film Festival. And this movie's all about your and Jessica Baker's return to Greenland. You two had gone on a trip in 2019, and you returned in 2022 to Greenland's west coast fjords and mountains on a renewable energy sailboat. And when you're on a boat powered by batteries, what are the challenges?
What aren't the challenges? I mean, like, not having a backup engine is really wild, you know? I mean, you need power to do simple things like get in and out of a harbor, or to lower an anchor, or to raise an anchor. Also, to find an anchor spot. Like, these are things that you don't even really think about. You're like, oh, well, whatever, it's a sailboat. Sailboats don't need power. But like, we were in uncharted waters, quite literally, like, not even joking, in these fjords in Greenland. And to not, have on any sort of like sailing map or whatever, like the proper places to anchor, like good anchorage is not easy to find when you have absolutely no idea where to go. And so you have to kind of like putz around with the motor to kind of try and figure out like your depth and whether or not it's silty or rocky. And it takes a lot of different attempts. And when you don't have a motor to do that, it becomes kind of a whole different adventure, right? Like, this is the very first time ever that the boat, having transitioned from a diesel engine to a green/electric engine, it was the first time ever going into the Arctic, and the Arctic sun is totally different than, like, say, where it had been staying during COVID in the Canary Islands, So the captain didn't know how the solar energy was going to really charge the engine, and we definitely ran into a bunch of speed bumps.
Were there any points in time where you're actually scared, like, holy shit, we don't have power and this is an issue?
I personally was. Multiple different times. I was on the boat for 32 days and fuck yeah, I was scared. I was way scared. I was over it. I was like over being scared. Like, the second part of our expedition, like the first part was the production side. The second part we had guests. And I think that the second part of the expedition was just nonstop type 2,
But this is coming from a person who's worked on Alaskan fishing boats before, and I'm sure you've seen the elements on the water before. Was it scarier being in Alaska fishing, or is it scarier on this boat with batteries?
Well, boat fishing in Alaska was a cakewalk. I mean, literally, like, we had electricity and cocktails if we needed it, but like being in Greenland without power and, oh, man, yeah, that was gnarly. That was way scary.
And you had been there in 2019, so over the next 3 years, the pandemic and everything happens, but they also have some of the hottest temperatures on record over there. When you come back 3 years later, are you able to see climate change in action? Like, does things look different?
Oh, yeah. I mean, they looked way different. And that was kind of one of the reasons that we wanted to do it. Like, call it like civilian science, if you will, like, we're not scientists. We aren't able to go and actually like get measurements and whatnot. What we observe is what we can talk about, and there were drastic changes. It was pretty wild. I mean, I'm sure you remember the glacier in like Chamonix, like 25 years ago,
right?
As opposed to like where it is right now. And you're kind of like, whoa, that's not, wait a second. Or, La Mer de Glace or whatever. And I mean, that's really, really visible. And there were definitely quite a few changes like that in just a couple of years. So it was pretty wild.
So climate change is real.
I mean, how do you answer that? Yeah, fuck yeah, it's fucking real. Surprise, surprise. No, I don't think it is a surprise. Most of us can acknowledge that, yeah.
Yeah. So where can people watch this movie?
Right now it's on like a film festival circuit. We're submitting to as many film festivals as we can. Hoping to do well with that. And then this fall, Mountain Hardware will have a large digital release, and we'll have a big old premiere this fall. Fall 2023 will be available online. Until then, we're kind of keeping it on film circuit tours.
Okay. And before you can make this movie public or do anything with this movie, you have to be born and raised. And for you, it's like you bounce around the states your first few years of life. You're born in California, then you move to Missouri, then to Michigan, and eventually you land in Utah. Why all of the moves?
Oh, my gosh. That's impressive. Just following Dad's career. Dad's in orthopedics. He's a doctor. So I was born somewhere in med school, and then, you have your residency and then your fellowship and then your first job, second job, etc. And he landed in Salt Lake City, Utah, because he wanted to be in a place where people were active and they really wanted to get better. I think that helps as a doctor to take care of people that really do want to get back out into their activities as soon as possible. So he also decided he wanted to raise his family in the mountains. So we moved to Salt Lake.
And when you grow up in Salt Lake City, or when the family moves out to Salt Lake City, and it's you, your younger brother, mom, and dad, and it's largely Mormon area, I think everybody knows that. When you buy a house there, do the neighbors immediately realize that you aren't Mormon and you start having missionaries coming over and trying to get the family to become Mormon?
Yep, 100%.
How long does it take for that to stop?
I mean, I don't know. They give it a good try. They try multiple times. There's definitely the science to it on their end where they must have some sort of a spreadsheet where they send X amount of missionaries over there for X amount of days, and then they report back the feedback. Oh, maybe it's kind of like, hey, there's a possibility. Let's send someone back. Oh, yeah, they were receptive to answering questions. Let's send someone back. And then eventually on the spreadsheet, you get the full blackout X, do not go back to this house. They stop coming back to your house. So it took a few years, but we eventually got that. We were blacklisted from the spreadsheet.
Well, your family was blacklisted from the spreadsheet, but you're hanging out with all kinds of Mormon kids because if you're going to have friends in Utah, a lot of them are going to be Mormon. That's just part of the game. And eventually it sounds like you personally were targeted. Mormons came to your house and were like, yeah, we get that you guys aren't Mormon, but do you have any kids?
So that's exactly what happened. We were on the X'd out list on the spreadsheet for probably 5 years, after moving in. And then I switched schools and started hanging out with some Mormon kids. And I think they went back and told their parents, hey, I'm hanging out with this girl. She's awesome, blah, blah, blah. And then they say, oh, well, what ward does she go to? And then they find out that I am not Mormon. And so I go back on the spreadsheet and they start sending Mormons there to target me specifically. Yeah, it definitely happened one day. Yeah, missionaries came to the doorstep and my mom's like, oh my gosh, I thought we've already talked about this. No, thank you, but have a great day. And they said, well, if not you, and I guess my mom said that this missionary kind of took a step in and looked upstairs and said, well, what about your daughter? And my mom lost it. She's like, how do you know I have a daughter? Get out of here. This is an invasion of privacy. Get off my doorstep. She got pretty mad about that. I mean, for good reason.
Yeah. Nobody needs to have religion pushed on them. But for you, life wasn't about religion. And it wasn't really all about skiing in the beginning. It was all about team sports. And from what I hear, it was soccer, basketball, and volleyball. And one way to sum up how you do things is to look at your basketball career. You were on the varsity basketball team your senior year. You played in every game, and you score a total of 11 total points, which is nothing. But the value of Rachael Burks is that she doesn't need to score points because you do all the shit that no one wants to do. You lead the team in steals, rebounds, and everything that's hustle related. Is that something that sets you apart from everybody else your whole life, is your out hustle attitude?
I'm dying. I can't believe how much research you've done. Holy shit. Yes, I did only score 11 points and I didn't win any, I didn't even get a participation award. I got spark plug award. So basically I just went out there and pretty much fouled out of every single game too. I just went out there to wreak havoc and hustle. Yeah, I'm a hustler, baby. I work hard. My work ethic, that's very, very, yes, I work hard. I think. I certainly have tried to. So with skiing, yes, show up, work hard,
Well, speaking of skiing, how does that even start? Because growing up, it sounds like you're a weekend warrior who might only go a handful of times a season.
Well, no, I didn't ever think oh, I'm going to be a professional skier, I skied with my parents on the weekends because I was given that gift. And I took that for granted as a kid. I didn't even really like skiing. And then I went away to college in Texas it wasn't until then that I realized that the mountains were part of me, and I missed them, and I was happy in them. And it takes that appreciation experience to then be able to you just kind of wake up, like a slap in the face, like this is important to you. And so I started spending more time in the mountains. I got a job up at Snowbird and started skiing more. And that's when I really started skiing. And
I'm going to cut you off because you're going way, way, way far ahead of ourselves. And I did so much research that we can't get all the way to Snowbird already.
Oh, right.
So we're going to jump back to you and your dad and your brother and getting on bikes before they're mountain bikes. And your dad would take you on gnarly, gnarly terrain with this like garbage setup. Is that kind of how you grew up?
Yes, I have photos of it. It was so awesome to have a father that was so ahead of the curve. He's like, oh, I've heard about this new sport called mountain biking, and evidently you just ride a bike, but in the mountains. And I remember when he got suspension, he'd take Peter and I out, and we would be on literally pretty much back brake bikes, like zero, like completely rigid, but on big, long mountain bikes. He brought lots of snacks, and he tried to take his time, and okay, we're going to make this fun. They're going to like this or whatever. But I look back on some of the rides that he took my brother and I on. Fisher Creek in Stanley was one of my first mountain bike rides. And that is 20 plus miles. And the uphill is so big. That was literally one of my first mountain bike rides. My dad would take us on these gnarly rides, but he'd be like, oh, well, we could do it. We'll just take our time. And sure enough, we did it. Yes, I was mountain biking before mountain biking was really a thing. And I'm lucky that was the case. It was so much fun. To look back at our photos and stuff like that. My brother and I would get in competitions to see who could get the muddiest. So we'd go through every puddle. You think about they're gross. That's cow pies and shit. That's so gross. And we'd go through these puddles full speed, but with our faces below our handlebars, trying to get as many of the splashes as we possibly could to see who was the muddiest at the end of the day. And that's how we measured our success.
And really, in thinking of you as a kid and just looking at your skiing over the years, it seems like you never ever play it safe and you're always going big and maybe not ignoring the consequences, but they don't stop you from doing anything. And does that all start young? Were you always doing shit that could get you hurt and getting stitches and broken bones and that kind of shit?
Holy shit. I don't know if I've ever been asked that. Let's think. Yeah, I think...
climbing trees and jumping off shit and doing all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I remember jumping off a roof because I was I think I could do that. Even as a really young kid, just being that's not that far kind of thing. I don't know. I remember looking off the roof. I was really young. I don't have a very vivid memory of what I was doing up there, but I was just oh, dude, that's not that far. That's before I even knew the word dude. This was a long time ago. And jumping off of it and realizing that it was way further than I thought. And I'm pretty sure I had a sprained ankle, but you're a kid, you kind of figure it out. So I guess, yeah, I've been doing that for a long time. I jump off things. In college, I remember jumping off some really big bridges and rope swings back in the day. Some sketchy ass rope swings, really sketchy. Must make it over this branch. If not, you will really hurt yourself, but you have to hold yourself up and over. I don't know. I've done some, definitely kind of have a different comfort zone with jumping off of things maybe, and maybe getting I don't know. I did gymnastics really early, and I think that I can attribute a lot of my air confidence to just getting inverted in second grade, learning how to do a round off back handspring backflip in second grade and kind of building from there, maybe not being as worried about error and stuff. I don't know. I haven't really thought about that.
All right. Well, now we're going to fast forward it to when you get to high school. I think that's when you met Julian Carr. And you're not a big skier at this point, so we're not even going to talk about Julian at this point. But we'll note that he's super smart and he's into soccer. And you are also super smart. You're into literature and soccer. And when you graduate, you're going to go to Southern Methodist University and you're going to play soccer there. How the hell do you pick Southern Methodist University?
Oh, it was the first college I got into. And I was so ready to leave. I was just ready to be independent. If there's one thing I can say about myself, it's that I came out of the womb independent. It was I can do everything myself. Let me figure this out on my own. I have always been extremely painfully to a fault independent. And you go through your whole life until you're 18, 17, whatever, under your parents' roof, under your parents' law, doing everything that you're supposed to do because that's your only option. And man, I just wanted to be rid of the parents and rid of the home and rid of Salt Lake and just get me out of anyone's control. I just wanted to run free and be my own individual and just kind of do my own thing. So that was the first college I got into. And I got a couple scholarships for soccer, but I said I'd walk on. And so they were totally fine with me showing up early and doing soccer tryouts and doing a walk on. And they were aware that I was coming. And I showed up to do the soccer walk on and didn't walk on at all. Just decided to be a college student and not play collegiate athletics. So my independence started literally the second I drove away from my parents' house.
And it wasn't a good move for you. I mean, Texas wasn't a good thing. I look at Texas, it's all about barbecue. And I know about that as I work with Traeger, and they send me a grill every couple of years. And my contact at Traeger, they told me that when a new employee is hired on there, they get something called the Traeger 20. And in most colleges, there's something known as the freshman 15. In your case, what happened when you went to school?
40.
Jesus. Does that just put you in a state of depression right away? Like your first 2 years in Texas, you're just eating, drinking, and not happy?
Hugely so. You just nailed it right on the head. It was horrible. It was empty and horrible.
What does that look like for you? Because, I mean, you don't seem like a depressed person now, but you don't know anything about anybody these days. But you seem like the most happy-go-lucky person that I know. But back in the day when you're facing depression, what does that look like for Rachael Burks?
Well, truly, the most beautiful thing that happened out of that was that I actually do know what it's like to be depressed. And I can say that wholeheartedly. I never got out of bed. I didn't even know how to get out of bed. I didn't have a reason to get out of bed. I hated the idea of being awake. That is the exact opposite of who I am. And I think that because I was able to get out of that, every day since then has been a very, very happy day. And I mean that wholeheartedly. I am an extremely happy, healthy, stoked human. I attribute a lot of that to a couple of really dark years. So I'm very, very stoked and happy. And there's nothing else really to say about that. I'm a happy, stoked person.
It's time for my first sponsor break, and I'm going to start things out with Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, the best online shopping experience in snow, in my opinion. Why are they so great? Because Peter Glenn does it all. Online, they have the best deals on the internet, and they offer free shipping on orders over $50, a no-hassle return policy that makes things easy to send back if you have to, and that's really important to me. You don't want to be hassled when you're returning a product. And what separates Peter Glenn from those internet-driven companies looking for the biggest profits is that Peter Glenn is really a mom-and-pop retail establishment, and they've been getting people out on snow for over 65 years. And when you're in their stores, you're going to find all the brands, all the products, and a lot of passionate, knowledgeable people who want to help get you dialed in for your next adventure. On top of that, Peter Glenn's going to price match. If you find what you want at another reputable website or store for a lower price, let the good folks know at Peter Glenn, and they're going to match that price. So please do that for me, and before you look elsewhere to outfit your adventure, head on over to peterglenn.com. My next sponsor is Elan Skis, and if you haven't noticed, Elan is building a cult following here in the States on the basis of their Ripstick line. I personally ski on the Ripsticks 96 Black Edition and the Ripsticks 106, and I will tell you that I noticed a difference in my skiing on day one. It's amazing how light and playful these skis can be while also remaining rock solid in the turn and at high speeds. It's the quality that I've come to expect from skis built in the Slovenian Alps. But what really separates Elan from its competition is their factory. They built a solar power plant on top of their state-of-the-art building, and this, combined with independence from fossil fuels, will provide a carbon sink as powerful as 15,000 trees on an annual basis. While a lot of brands are saying they are making a difference when it comes to the environment, Elan is really putting their money where their mouth is. To find out more about all things Elan, head on over to elanskis.com. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. So Texas wasn't for you, but it makes you realize how much you love the mountains and how much you miss the mountains, even though you didn't know the mountains were your passion when you were in high school and everything. So you go back to Utah, you go to the Snowbird job fair, and you're like, I'm going to get a job at Snowbird and be a ski bum for a year. And then you don't get a job. What do you end up doing?
No! I worked at a bank. I got a job at Wells Fargo. I was a bank teller.
That has to be so painful because I don't know if you're diagnosed with ADD, but you are one big bubble of energy, and just sitting in a bank teller booth, that has to be just misery.
I banked the most of it. It wasn't Texas. I was happy.
Okay.
I had a paycheck. Basically, when I didn't go back to college, I was 100% cut off. That was the end of the parental support. They said they'd love me, but they didn't support any part of that. And that meant they didn't emotionally support my decision. And they also did not ever financially help me at all. So it was great to have my own job, my own money, and I was living in Salt Lake close to the mountains, and I had my independence. That's kind of all I need. That's my recipe for happiness, is just being independent. So I wasn't that bad. Yeah, it wasn't that bad.
And then one of the most pivotal points of your life happens at this point. You end up with a call, or someone hooks you up with a phone call that gets you a part-time job at a rental shop. And while some people would think that that's a shit job in a ski town, to you, does it feel like you've landed a dream job?
I landed a dream job. It changed everything. It was such a big deal. I literally, my first day, like I showed up on New Year's Eve, 2001, which is a weird day to like show up for like quote unquote interview. And then Joni Barrett at Snowbird, she basically didn't have room. She had a full staff, like, right? I wasn't hired at the job fair, right? I literally, like, she had a full staff. And she's like, well, we can like give you like a couple shifts. It was because of my friend Nick Mathis. He worked there already. He's like, listen, there's this girl. She's awesome. Like, she could just pick up when people don't want to work. So what was my first day? On New Year's Day, 2002. Like, great. We'll hire her on New Year's Eve. We'll all go out and party, and we'll throw her to the wolves on New Year's Day. And there's never been a happier worker on New Year's Day in the history of time. I was so excited. I loved my job. I loved the people I met. I'm still friends with a lot of them. I literally like skied every day. I loved working in the rental shop. It was the best.
And when you work in a shop like that, you know, it's all dudes first and foremost, and then yourself.
Oh, yeah.
And it's people fucking with each other all day long.
All day.
That's just like the fun of working in a shop. And when the shop kids tell you, your buddies at the shop tell you that you should enter the free ride contest that's coming to Snowbird, you thought they were making fun of you.
I totally thought they were making fun of me.
But then when you actually go see the contest, do you immediately realize that they weren't fucking with you and you could do it?
Yeah, I was the only girl there, and you had two options of wearing things at Snowbird. You know, you had like a uniform, and they had girls' pants and boys' pants. The girls' pants were like super tight, and you have to bend over to like help people in and out of boots all day. So I got the boys' pants, which were like cargo pants, right? And I wore the cargo pants and got constant shit. Like, Burks, why don't you just wear the girls' pants? You look like a boy. You look like a boy, you know? And I was like, well, whatever, man. Like, it's functional, and I can keep my little screwdrivers in the cargo pockets. This is functional. Like, this isn't a question of, like, me trying to be the only girl in the shop and trying to look good. Like, I'm literally just probably working harder than you guys because you're off in the distance making a fart noise every single time I bend over. Literally. Like, I was, like, with clients all the time, and I'd be like, okay, what size shoe you are? And I'm like, here, let me help you with this boot. And I'd bend over, and they'd go, like, I would, like, look over my shoulder to make sure no one was around, and I would like bend over to help someone into their boots, and sure enough, the fart noise would come out from behind the like boot locker, you know? So anyway, I was like helping this little itty bitty boy out with his boots, and they were so cute. They're these little itty bitty boots, you know, and I went to help him, and I got him on. I'm like, how do those feel? And he goes, you look like a boy. And everybody in the shop hit the deck, literally fell over, because that's what they've been telling me the entire season. And then the mom says, sweetheart, no. That's a tomboy. That's a little girl that wants to be a boy. And I've never in my life heard the end of that. So yes, when they told me like, hey, you should enter one of those comps, I assumed that they were making a fart noise at me. Like, I thought they were completely full of shit. And then I went and watched a comp and was kind of blown away. I was like, dude, I could do that. And I also notably was very discouraged watching the disparity between the male podium and the women's podium. Like, the guys were hitting huge airs, multiple cliffs, getting inverted, doing tricks. And the girls were just kind of, at that point, rarely leaving the ground. And I remember being disappointed because, yeah, I was just like, man, girls are capable of more. So that was a big pivotal moment for me, just because I did realize I could do the competition, or I could try. And I did want to kind of show everybody that girls can hit airs too.
So the next year you head back to school, but you do enter that Snowbird competition, and I think you qualify in like second, which has to be like a holy shit moment for you. But you don't end up at the podium on that one, but you do get nominated for the Sick Bird Award, and that's like a huge honor. Do you realize what a big deal it is at the time?
No, I was excited to get the noise, but you know, that was a big deal. I actually have it on film. Like, you could hear the cry, like, nominated for Sick Bird. You hear him do the screech, you know, and then my arms go up in the air, and so you can tell I'm really excited. So that was a big deal for me.
And then I think it's a couple weeks later, you grab some demo skis from your shop And the next comp's at Crested Butte. How did that one go?
I got third. It was amazing. I paid for the comp, I paid to enter the comp, and I paid for my lodging. I paid for everything, you know what I mean? And I thought third place podium would be like, I don't know, $50 or something, or get your entry fee back or something, and they said, in third place, winning $2,400 is Rachael Burks from Salt Lake City. And I wish there had been a camera on me then, because I literally got weak in the knees. I had never in my life seen $2,000 in my bank account. It was such a big deal. I made $320, I think, every 2 weeks at the rental shop. I literally was living off of $350 every 2 weeks, And I got over $2,000 for winning third place, and I about freaking fell over. Oh, it was such a big deal.
So that has to be mind-blowing. And do you leave there with the idea that you could potentially be a pro skier? Or was it more like, that was fucking awesome, now it's time to go back to school?
Oh, God. Shit. I think that subconsciously, someone asked me the other day, it was actually on a panel, I was asked, what is it about your sport that's magnetic?
Okay.
And it wasn't like, oh, what's your favorite part, or what's the best part, or whatever, because that's an easy answer. It's always like powder, I love skiing and powder. But what was the most magnetic part of my career? And I think that I always, from the very, very, very beginning, wanted to prove that women were capable of more than what we were getting credit for. And so I think more so than anything, that fueled my fire to keep raising the bar and pushing limits and showing, I'm like, okay, shit, if I can get third here, I want to keep doing this. I want to see how this competition thing goes. I want to keep going big and trying new things and hitting airs and showing that women, it wasn't ever oh, maybe I could be a pro skier. It was more hey, maybe this is the next step to getting the visibility, to show that women are doing more in terms of having a space in media where other women can see it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But the next step that you take takes you over to England, a place with dry slopes. And I think you finished school in Oxford. Why do you pick England?
Well, I love English. I love learning, and it was a dream come true to study literally on the same streets in some of the same rooms as people that have inspired me, poets and writers that have inspired me to study English in the first place. So it was a dream come true. Truly a dream come true. I worked my ass off and learned a lot, and I just felt like I was in a daydream the whole time, just studying in a place that significant in the literary aspect of the word,
Yeah. You graduate, you come back to the States. It's 2004, I feel like. And you're living with Kelly Holland?
Yeah, Kelly Holland, pro skier. Woo!
She's like, hey, let's compete on the European tour. And you're like, Kelly, I've got $350 in my bank account. I can't go anywhere.
Literally.
But this is a time in your life where if you want to live, you've got to just say, fuck it. And Kelly was like, hey, I got frequent flyer miles. You pack up your $350 and we're going to Europe. Is that kind of how that goes?
Holy cow. Yes, literally. She's the reason. That was my Charlie and the Chocolate Factory gold ticket, Kelly saying, I have frequent flyer miles and I could get you over to Europe. And literally we went over there. I'm not joking. You did your research. I had $350 in my bank account and we stayed there for a month, almost a full month. I was so out of money. It's so broke. But we rationed vitamins and these little granola bars because we couldn't afford power bars. This is way before a Luna bar, heaven forbid. It was still that brown power bar thing. Oh God. Anyway, but we literally did. We rationed vitamins. We had packets of soup that we could pack because they were didn't weigh anything. We packed oats, those little instant oats that you could just add water to. So we had rations for every day. But I cannot believe that I lived over there for that long with $350 in my bank account.
I can't believe that either. I don't think you win a podium on that trip either.
No.
When I think about that, I think it's because of how you ski. It looks like it's hard for you to reel things in at all times. You're known for huge features that are high consequence. And have you ever had a thought in your head of maybe I should reel it in a little bit so I can land my shit and maybe get on the podium? Or is it always one speed for you and you're always trying to prove that what you do is badass?
One speed. I've had people the entire time that I competed, they're like, Burks, dude, just stay on your feet. Ski a solid fluid line to the bottom. Just fucking stop doing that. Just reel it in, just stay on your feet. And I did have one comp where I did that and I didn't qualify for the last day. It wasn't my style of skiing and I didn't hit anything and I just skied fast and fluid. and it wasn't good enough. And I thought to myself that I'd never do that again. And I'm kind of surprised I did one in the first place. So nope, that's not my style. I've always wanted to do the same thing that the guys were doing.
Okay. And I think it was on this trip, but I'm not 100% sure. But I think this is where you get hooked up with Smith goggles. And I believe that happens through Billy Poole. And I also think that your first paying sponsor, your first pretty big sponsor, happens to be on that trip because of a crash that you had in Verbier. What's the story behind Peak Performance?
Yeah. We were competing in Verbier, and I decided to line up. It was like a triple, and I fucking ate shit and just tomahawked down to the bottom of the venue. But it was kind of awesome because there's a huge crowd and everyone was screaming, and it was really fun. And I was stoked that I did that because I think, especially in Europe, for one reason or another, they weren't used to seeing the girls do
like send it
cliffs in a row. Yeah, exactly. So it was awesome. And I was approached that day by a gentleman that said, "Hey, have you ever heard of Peak Performance?" And of course, me being a fucking dumbass, I was like, "Nope." You know, you know. And he's like, "Well, I think you have a future with the company. Would you mind entertaining a phone call?" And so, yeah, I literally can say that I picked up my very first sponsorship ever by failing. Literally by falling. And that was actually a wild call because Kelly and I went down to compete in Vars, France, and we were so out of money. We could barely put petrol in the teeny tiny little car that we had, and we showed up and we didn't even have enough money to eat, and we ended up getting invited with some random people to sit down and whatever. They basically took pity on us and gave us a little bit of red wine and like some leftovers or whatever, and they included us in the meal. It was such a big treat for us because Kelly and I definitely didn't have any money for wine. And so there's this hilarious photo of us. We hadn't showered in forever, and we're sitting in the corner of this dinner table, and we're smiling with these 2 glasses of red wine. And I mean, I don't think we brushed our teeth either, whatever. And so we just have sweaters. They're like red wine sweaters. And it's one of my favorite photos ever taken because it just shows this moment of like ski bumping. We've been sleeping in the car. There's skis between us. We can't even see each other between the passenger and the driver because there's so many skis and gear and stuff. And we were sleeping in the car in McDonald's parking lots because they had lights and we felt safe, and they had Wi-Fi so we could take our computers up to the McDonald's parking lot at night because we didn't have phones, you know?
Yeah.
And we could like send emails kind of piggybacking off of the free McDonald's, whatever. We were just so broke, and this photo is amazing. Anyway, so we were there in bars, like sweaters on our teeth and all, and I had my scheduled phone call. I have a prepaid phone card. I might have even called the guy collect. I'm dead serious. This is from a payphone. And he's like, Peak Performance is a very small, we're a small company and you're new and we don't know really how much we'd be able to offer you financially, but would you entertain a sponsorship and getting kitted out in our clothing and whatnot and a small stipend, you know? And I was like, oh gosh, yeah, sure. And he's like, well, we can only offer you $5,000. And I'm so glad that I was tethered into a payphone because, again, I just buckled. I remember being on belay, holding like, I was down to $0. I was just banking on getting back to the flight at that point, you know? And this guy was like, we can offer you $5,000. I couldn't believe it. I got off the phone and walked over to Kelly on shaky knees, you know, and I was like, you're never going to believe this. That was such a big moment. It was such a big deal. Anyway, so that was, how I got my first sponsorship.
That's amazing. So eventually you head back to the States, and I believe the next season you're living in a house with Billy Poole. You're skiing with him every day. Julian Carr is with you most days. But first and foremost, please describe who Billy Poole was and why he was so awesome.
Billy Poole, you want energy, man. This guy was effervescent.
Like more than you?
With stoke and froth, absolutely more than me. Like, he taught me everything. He was so stoked that when he smiled, like, you could see steam coming off of his head. He was so amped about skiing. I don't think I've ever met anyone as stoked about skiing as Billy was. And he was really motivated, really hard worker. And living at that house, it was the Costa de Shrednar. Like, I was on a mattress in the basement. We had multiple people on mattresses in the basement. We just push our mattress up against the wall, you know, like, then I eventually got in my own room, which was really nice. But like, Cody Barnhill was there, and Brady Smedrew, and Justin Modrew, and Griffin Post was even there for a while. Drew Steckline, Billy Poole, Julian Carr. Like, this was OGSLC, man. Like, the Costa de Shrednar was loose. It was awesome. Such dirtbags. It was so great. Anyway, yeah, Billy would wake me up in the morning. He'd like pound on the door and be like, Burks, let's go. Like, I already made your breakfast sandwich. And I swear to God, that man made a breakfast sandwich for me. We'd leave in the dark and he'd be like, let's go, and having someone A, with breakfast, and B, like, it's a ride up to the mountain with someone that just is frothing to be up there. Like, that was such a gift, like there was never a lazy day where it's like, oh, well, let's just enjoy our coffee and have like a long breakfast. It was always, let's get up there. Like, oh, dude, one day I was serving tables. So I served tables for 20 years. That's the only way I got through all of my like ski bunning. But like I got home from serving tables one night, I don't know, it was like probably 10:30. And Billy was sitting there at the Crested Butte Shrednar and it was dumping. And he's like, let's fucking go up the canyon. And it was New Year's Eve too. Like, this is no plans, no nothing. I just worked New Year's Eve and I got home at like 10:30 and he's like, Burks, let's go, pack your shit, let's go. And the road was going to close at like midnight, or all I know is like, I packed my shit super fast. We get in the car, it's dumping. We are the last car up the canyon. The sheriff's all over us. We have absolutely no plan to stay anywhere. We have no person up there to stay with. The sheriff's got his lights on behind us. Like, you guys got to figure it out. So we parked the car and walked into the Rustler Lodge and just poached. Like, started hanging out with people and eventually found like a random place to stay, and then woke up interlodged and like had one of the best New Year's Day shred sessions ever. And it's because of his motivation. He's like, no, we'll figure it out. Whatever. Snow is more important. Skiing is more important. We'll figure it out. Like, we will figure it out. I slept in a freaking car with that kid more times because we didn't have plans. He's like, fuck it. Just fucking bring a sleeping bag. We'll fucking figure it out, So like, that was him. He just wanted to shred. It was awesome.
And he wanted to be a pro skier and eventually makes that happen. But he also wants to pull you in and make you a pro skier as well, because he knows you have the talent to do it. And what was really cool about him was that he would always invite you to shoots that you weren't invited to, because he knew that you could not only hang, that you were going to impress people and you're going to eventually have a pro ski career. Was it super awkward being the fifth wheel on trips with him?
Always.
Like, you'd have to show up and be like, this is my friend Rachel?
Yeah, I was full on fifth wheel. He's like, whatever works, just show up. It's going to be fine. They're going to be fine. Like, he didn't ask. I can't imagine nowadays. Like, it's like I get a call from a photographer to go shoot, like I did yesterday. Like, I got a call from a photographer. I went shoot. Like, if I just randomly brought someone along with me that had little to no experience, zero sponsors, like zero ability to like sell a photo to a sponsor or anything, they're just like tagging along. Like, that's so inappropriate. You know what I mean? Like, that's just not good form. And he did that relentlessly with me. So I'm very thankful that he's like, yeah, you could come. And then I'd show up and you could just feel the energy. Like, what is she doing here? It was just like, just put your skis on. Let's go.
Yeah, because he's bringing you into a men's world. It's probably like 10 dudes and he's showing up at the girl that no one knows.
Yeah, 100%.
It's time for my final round of sponsors, and I'm going to start things off with Best Day Brewing. Over the years, sure, I've enjoyed drinking beer, maybe a little too much sometimes. I mean, once it hits your lips, it tastes so good. But these days, I have so much to do, and I need a beer that doesn't slow me down. That's where Best Day comes into my life. While I still drink alcoholic beer, I'm finding that most days, I just want the IPA flavor and not the alcohol. And with Best Day, I found that their hazy IPA and their Kolsch have just as much, if not more, flavor than the alcoholic versions. And I've done blind taste tests on my friends. None of them knew the difference when I handed them a pint of Best Day. And after we had 3 or 4 beers at my taste test, all my friends were psyched when I let them know that they weren't consuming alcohol and everyone could drive home. While I'm not asking you to quit drinking, I know that most of us would be better off slowing down, and Best Day is the perfect choice for doing that. So next time you're at the store, please pick up a 6-pack of Best Day and support the beer that supports me. And if you can't find Best Day at your local grocer, head on over to bestday.com, and orders over $50 get free shipping. My final sponsor is a brand that you should pour your Best Day brewing in. I'm talking about Stanley, another iconic Seattle brand that has been ahead of the curve since 1913. While we all know Stanley for creating that iconic green bottle that kept your grandpa's coffee hot all day long, they still do that and a lot more these days. They're still all about adventure. They're still all about keeping your beverages hotter or colder than any other product ever created. And I know this because I've been given just about every water bottle on the planet, and nothing comes close to what I found in Stanley. And Stanley has always been the right choice when it comes to the planet. If you're still using single-use plastics for your beverages, it's time to make a change. And I'm making it easier than ever to do that. You're going to save 30% on all your Stanley products when you head on over to stanley1913.com and go shopping. I highly recommend picking up a water bottle and a set of pint glasses. When you check out, enter the code drinkfast, that's all lowercase, all one word, and you're going to save 30%, and that's the best deal you're going to find anywhere on Stanley products. So those are my sponsors. Now let's get back into the podcast. These uninvited trips are kind of what gets you out of the contest game, because Billy and Julian were part of the Levitation Project, and while I never understood really what the Levitation Project was all about, I knew that they created content. And you go on a shoot with them uninvited, you hit arguably the most important cliff of your life, and it's not filmed, but tell me what happens on this day.
I, again, wasn't supposed to be, I wasn't supposed to be there. They're just like, you should show up anyway. And I hit the cliff and I get to the bottom. And Nico is like, what the fuck, Burks? Why didn't you let us get like a camera? Like, that was sick. Like, what? You know, like, I don't think he had any idea. He's like, don't just do that without like a photographer or a filmer. Like, Jesus, you know? And then he's like, well, you want to film with us? And that was how I got my start, was with the Levitation Project. My very first ever film line was with them, and I didn't even see where the camera was pointed. I skied a completely different aspect of a different face.
I'm sure that whole first trip is a ton of rookie mistakes because you've never shot for a camera before. So you're not knowing to count down and let them know when you're dropping in. You don't know to be on the walkie-talkie when you need to be on it. It's like you're learning everything, but you're on a trip of a lifetime. Like that first trip, you're going to some dream locations on a month road trip, and you don't know what you're doing.
100%. Wow, you're bringing back some really awesome. Yeah, I was actually hanging out with Adam Clark yesterday. He was the photographer on that trip. I had never filmed a day in my life, and I got an invitation to go on this month-long road trip with Levitation Project, and it would start in the Pacific Northwest, in Alpental, Crystal, Baker. Like, we filmed and shot Pacific Northwest, and then we went up to Revelstoke, and I went heli skiing at Micah Creek. That was my very first A, heli skiing trip, B, non-competition ski trip, and C, it was like the first time I'd ever like filmed a shot. And I mean, like, so many rookie errors. I fucked up so many shots, and they still gave me a chance. They still let me do that. Like that, I have so much gratitude that they freaking paid for me to go, and I had zero experience. Like, I didn't barely have sponsors. I was so fortunate to do that. And I ended up, this is kind of embarrassing, whatever, but we got to shoot so many. We shot Pillow Talk and like these incredible famous pillow lines. And I knew that Seth Morrison had been up there, and Seth Morrison was like, oh, I emulated, you know? And I was like, show me some of the things that Seth's done. And I went and just basically tried to hit big airs, which is weird at Micah Creek. You know, you'd think you just want to do pillows. I just tried to hit cliffs, and I ended up really sending it and having a super successful heli trip. But I can't believe that was my first time ever. It was wild. Super lucky.
And that whole trip, I mean, they knew what they were doing by watching you skiing, because it all comes together. You get nominated for a powder award. That has to be a dream come true. And I would think the coming out party for Rachael Burks in the industry. And do you feel like that's where everyone in the industry realizes who Rachael Burks is?
Oh, gosh. Shoot. Maybe. I don't actually know my moment.
Well, is that when you start getting ski sponsors and stuff like that? Is that when that all comes together?
Yeah, actually, sure. That was a big, big part of it. Yeah. Getting nominated for Powder Award was huge. And then I was on the cover of Powder that year with a big old air. And then the next year for Powder, but mind you, this was like Powder Girl. But I was on the first two covers ever of Powder Girl. And you know what it was? It was visibility. So you're absolutely right. Like, I started to like appear in media, and people were like, who on earth is this girl? So yes, that was it. That was my chance, is to start showing that I could do these things.
I usually talk a lot about money, but we're only going to talk a little bit about it. But who are the brands that sponsor you? And when you think about your ski career, how much is the most that you were able to make in one season? Like, were you able to not work at all and just ski?
No. Well, I guess there was one year where, no, absolutely not.
That's crazy, because you were on the first two covers of Powder Girl. You're nominated for a Powder Award. And there's probably like 30 dudes out there that aren't at the level of your skiing, but are probably making enough money to not have another job, but be a pro skier. Is that frustrating to you to know that the money is not there for women at that point?
Oh, God, I wish I could say yes. But looking back on it, yes. And it's still not there. Like, right now, am I frustrated? Sure. But at the time, I was in Candyland. Like getting a penny and free gear was so much more than I had ever even dreamed of, that Like, I don't know. I was just lucky. And I was making good money serving tables and I loved it. I failed the business aspect of my career. If there's one thing that I really did fail on, it was that. And that's because I knew that I could go on a trip, come back broke, literally work like 7 shifts in a row and make it like $1,000, you know? And that was kind of how I lived. I never really asked for more from the skiing. I never asked for more. And I never got mad when they would cut. Like I had one sponsor like cut my contract. If I had a 2-year contract and they cut what I was supposed to make my second year more than half. Then, you know, like they give you the like, well, there are people that, you know, like work here full-time desk jobs that are taking pay cuts because of this, this, and that. And we're all taking pay cuts and like we aren't making much money in the ski industry. And so you're like, well, shit, who am I? I'm just a skier. Of course I'll take a pay cut. Like, gosh, I'll just serve more tables, you know, like I'm not going to ask for more or hold to my contract if there are people that can't even ski every day that, you know, like are barely making ends meet. Fuck that. Like I'll fucking figure it out with serving tables. So I was really bad with all that. I just always felt so lucky to be getting what I got. And I knew I could make it work with serving tables. And I don't know. I sucked at that part.
And they're all liars because I've never heard of anyone in-house taking a pay cut. Because everybody makes shit money anyway. And if they're like, hey, your 50,000 is going to become 40,000, but you're still going to be working 40 hours a week. I've just never heard of it anywhere in any industry. Maybe during the pandemic that happened, but I don't think that happened anywhere else. But we don't need to talk about money anymore other than it sucks knowing that you couldn't make enough to not work, which kind of blows, but whatever. The exciting thing has to be that you have this pro career. You, Julian, and Billy, you all have these pro careers, and it's what you guys have all been dreaming about. And when I think about ski style, it's like you and Billy always seem to send the biggest cliffs and most technical lines. But Julian was a bit different. He seemed to want to hit cliffs that are even bigger than what you guys thought the biggest cliffs were. And he'd get himself into a zen state, and he'd just do his thing. Do you or Billy ever do any of that Julian type shit? Did he ever coax you into doing it?
Billy hit the Wolvie, like, what is it, like 125, I think.
Huh.
I know he hit that once or twice. Let's think. He got Parker to do a big one up on top of Fantasy Ridge. It was like 90 plus.
Jesus.
And then I have stood on top of a million cliffs with Julian, like literally a million, like so many. And I've definitely been coached by him and by Billy. And one of the things that they said to me, well, this is Julian. I've got to give Julian credit for this. He said, every time you're on top of a big cliff, literally he's like, take 10 more steps back up the hill, like hike up 10 steps higher than you think you need to go because speed is your friend. That was one of the things that, and actually Billy said it too, but like that was one of the things that really resonated with me in terms of like coaching from them. And they said, you know, you're going to hit these cliffs and then when you're done with the cliffs, you're going to think, man, I could have gone bigger. And that's so true. And it's especially true for women. Every single girl that I shoot with, we always hit like a cliff together and they're like, man, I could have gone bigger. And I guess that probably is the same thought process for guys too. But like, that was something that they ingrained in me. Like, yo, you think you're going to have enough speed? Now take 10 steps up the hill and that's how fast you need to be going, kind of thing. And that helped so much. I mean, shit, that helped with a big air that I hit literally like 2 weeks ago, you know, like I was up on top of it. I was like, holy cow, it's been a while since I've done this. And I was like, okay, take 10 more steps up the hill, you know? So that was a big, huge part of the coach, but I've never hit anything like nearly as big as Julian. We've hit cliffs together, but they aren't any of his like famous ones.
Okay. And then everything is working out for you, for all of you. And in 2008, Billy's filming with Warren Miller and he has an accident and you lose your best friend. And I can't imagine how difficult that must have been. How do you hear the news and how do you react to it?
I got a call on my cell phone and they needed to know Billy's mom's number because they needed emergency contact. And so I guess I was kind of I was emergency contact. So I heard he was in the helicopter or going to be. And so I raced to the ER and they were able to call his mom, Phyllis's number, and gave it to them. And then I was on the phone with Phyllis and she told me that he had passed away and I was in the ER waiting room and that was hard still hard to talk about.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. I mean, when you think about it, I mean, it changes you fundamentally as a person, I'm sure. Does it change your skiing at all?
Totally changed my skiing. Yeah. I mean, it didn't change my skiing in that, like, I was afraid of skiing. It was more just like, he was such a just Stokemeister, best friend, partner in crime. Like, we were like attached at the hip, you know? I mean, like, I don't know. I was lucky enough to spend like 2 of his last 3 nights on the planet with him, you know? Like, we were throwing down. He was so freaking excited to be filming with Warren Miller. He was so excited. I'll never forget him. We met at the huddle, and I was like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm filming. I'm like, who are you filming with? He's like, Warren Miller. He was so excited. He was so pumped, you know? So I guess I didn't handle it very well. I still don't. I don't know. It was weird to have, he was kind of like the wind in the sail, I guess. It just kind of lost a little bit of wind. Yeah, I don't know. It was just really tough to lose someone that was your like everyday ski buddy, you know?
Yeah, I can't even imagine, and I'm sorry for that loss.
It's okay.
And
yeah, it's a long time
while
ago.
he was able to shoot with Warren Miller, and that was his dream, for you, filming with a major company is a dream for you. And how does everything with TGR come together for you?
Yeah. Oh, speaking of Candyland, I had no idea what all that was all. Dina was a sponsor for TGR, and so that was what my original in with TGR. I didn't know that like sponsors paid. I didn't know that all of the athletes that I had grown up watching and like admiring and like literally rewinding. I had VHS MSP movies, you know, and I'd rewind and I knew where my favorite parts were and I'd fast forward to my favorite part. I grew up watching all these athletes. I had no idea that the only reason they were in the movie is because they had sponsors that were paying for them to be in said movies. So when I started filming with TGR, I had zero clue on the planet that was how I got my opportunity. I kind of thought I got my opportunity because I had earned it. And I had, like, I'd worked my ass off to get the sponsors in the first place, but I had zero clue that, like...
It was calculated to get you in the movie?
Yeah, no idea.
And you were in 3 movies with them. The token female in the movies. Like, I mean, in Light the Wick, I know you're the only woman, it looks like. And it was almost expected at that point in time. But was it crazy to you that you're like one of one in one of the premier movies in the industry?
Yeah, man, that was wild. Yeah. And it was, whew. Yeah, I guess, okay, I'll say this very carefully.
Yeah, you don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but this is definitely a point of contention.
So I will say that my attitude was I never wanted to be in a movie because I didn't deserve to be there. Like, if my shots weren't good enough, then I didn't deserve to be in the movie. And that's one of the things that I rationalized. I call them sneeze segments with TGR. If you sneeze, you miss it. But like my sneeze segments with TGR, I wrote off on like, well, it's my own fault. I didn't get enough shots. Like, I didn't get enough A or A+ shots. And I'm going to just gently say that there are a lot of shots. There's years of shots of filming that did not make any movie. And so I think that there was potential for maybe like including a few more shots in a few of the movies, but I also never wanted to just be in there because I was a girl. I wanted them all to be A+ shots, and I never ever complained, and I still don't. Like, I'm grateful to be in those films. I had a blast. I had so much fun. I met so many cool people, but like, yeah, there's definitely a lot of shots that didn't make the movie.
That has to be frustrating when you're putting your life on the line and the shots don't make the movie, but that's part of the game. Yeah. The editors have the choice and call in that. But it seems like TGR replaced you with Angel Collinson. And I don't know if it's because Dynastar pulled their money out or that they just wanted to have Angel in the movie. Was it almost like they couldn't have 2 women in the movie and they're like, all right, we're going to make a trade and we're going to put Angel in?
No. Nope, not at all. Like that. 100% not the case. Not at all. Period. End of statement.
Okay.
Like, not at all. For what it's worth, Dynastar only paid for my segment in the recessions. I don't.
Recession was one.
The first one that I was in was the only one that Dynastar had like given money for. And then the next year I called up TGR because I was filming with Levitation Project then too. So they're like, we want you to commit to TGR. And I was like, yeah, but I owe so much to Levitation Project. My loyalty lies with them. I'm going to keep filming with Levitation Project. I can do both. And I did. You know, they weren't very excited about that, but whatever. Like, I owe Levitation Project everything at that point. And I did want to be loyal and, you know, hardworking with both companies. And there's no reason I couldn't be. And so I worked with both companies that year. And then the next year, Dina Star pulled out. They were no longer sponsoring TGR. And so the next year I called up TGR with no idea still on how it worked. And I was like, yo, I'm in. I'm going to give you my whole season. I'm moving to Jackson. Let's go. And they're like, Rachel, that's super great. But you know that you need to come up with $20,000, like for us to even put a camera on you at a local level. And so I did the local level TGR thing for 2 years, and I was able to scrounge together, dude, it's wild. Anyway, yeah. So we scrounged together some money and made that work, but I was local level and it was wild. You know, I showed up and fucking filmed on the shitty days. And then a lot of other athletes would come into town on the good days where it's like a good storm is going to go blue. Like all of a sudden it wasn't just me and Griff and Laguerre, and it was me and for 1 year. And even like, I'm pretty confident. I don't know if you want, he even paid for that local level, like camera. He paid for that, like out of his own pocket. Like that was wild. Anyway, so at the end of that, I couldn't scrounge together. We couldn't make that 20K work anymore. And I chose not to do that anymore. Like that was not at all like me getting replaced or me, like I didn't piss anyone off. I didn't like, I'm still homies with that. Like everything was cordial and lovely and shit, truly 100% at the end of the day, there's better people for that. And Angel is a better skier than I am. She's so much better at skiing than I am. Her AK lines, like I look at my AK lines, holy shit, man. I can't even like fathom some of the stuff that she skis. And even when we ski around the resort, she is a much better skier than me. She deserves more. She deserves a larger segment and more sponsorship, 100%. And same with the girls that are doing it now. Like that's what it's all about. I'm happy that girls are getting time that they deserve, and they are more deserving than I ever was. So there's truly that, you know, like they deserve that time more than I did.
Well, I am really glad that I asked if Angel replaced you, because while that was totally kind of an off-the-wall question and it didn't happen, and you made that very clear that that was not the case, we got a really great answer out of that. And I didn't realize that people are paying to play out of their own pocket, which is something that, you know, when you want to make a career in stand-up comedy, people do that shit all the time. They go to a comedy club and the comic will actually pay to get on the mic, and that's how they can build a career. I didn't even realize it happened in skiing, and I worked behind the scenes in skiing for a long time, managing athletes, so I thank you for that insight. And while that has to be frustrating from the athlete perspective, you are known for being the most stoked person in skiing. It sounds like Billy Poole was more stoked than you, but you learned from him and you're carrying the torch. And I would think arguably the most stoked moment that you've had in your career would be the 2012 Red Bull Cold Rush. Would that be fair to say?
Hell yeah, that was awesome.
What separates an event like Cold Rush from everything else out there?
Oh, it was so wonderful. Like, I mean, first of all, I was invited. I was put up in a hotel. I didn't have to like, like back when I was competing in Europe and whatnot, we'd all pitch in. Like there'd be like 8 of us, literally, that would pitch in for a teeny tiny little 1-bedroom, like European room. You know what I mean? And like the Cold Rush, man, they paid for our lodging. They took care of us. They like all of our food was taken care of. And then we got 3 days of heli skiing in Silverton, which was, holy shit, it was a dream come true. It was awesome. I almost didn't do the comp though. Did I already tell you that?
No.
I got invited and I was done competing. I was like, I'm done competing. I suck at competing. I've never won anything. I fucking suck at competing. I don't want to do this. I don't like the anxiety. I don't sleep ahead of time. Like, I'd rather just go free skiing. No thanks. And then my roommate, Tide Smith, at the time, he pulled me aside because I called Pep, who just was kind of running the event. And I called Pep and I was like, man, I just don't know if I can do that. Like, and I told Tide, I'm like, I just don't like competing. I don't want to do it. Like, it's not my thing, you know? And Tide literally started yelling at me. He's like, you sit down right here. He's like, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. You need to realize how lucky you are, A, to get that invite, B, you get to go to Silverton, and C, even if you finish dead last, who cares? You get to go heli skiing for 3 days. Get back on the phone, call Pep right now, tell him you were stupid, and get in that coffee. And I was like, oh God, you're so right. That's so stupid. Like, who cares if I win or not? You know, so I like definitely like was like, oh, never mind. I'm so excited. I'll be there. Blah, blah, blah. I had a great time. And it's funny when you stop worrying about proving and winning or whatever. You just like, I don't know. It was really fun. It was a fun comp and it was fun to ski and it was really fun to win something. It was the first time ever. So
yeah, it's your first podium at 30 years old, which is pretty amazing. Yep. And then not too long after that, I think you get your next podium because one of the most important events in skiing, I mean, more important than the Red Bull Cold Brush or the Olympics, is the Payne McClonky. And you ended up winning the small mountain competition, I think, in 2012. And what does that event mean to you? Because while I make all these jokes about it being so important, there is a vibe of that event that you really don't get anywhere else.
No, I mean, it is the most important. And when I say that, like, Seth was kind of like one of my role models or like I emulated Seth. I mean, Shane was right next to, but it was always Shane and Seth, you know, and I wanted to ski like Shane and Seth and I wanted to be like Shane because I wanted to like just shred, but also not take it so seriously that you can't have fun and be goofy and enjoy the ride and just make fun of yourself. You can always make fun of yourself. If you take yourself too seriously, like you miss out on so much of the nerdy goofiness, you know, and skiing is goofy. It's ridiculous. Okay. Like there is like, if you think you're really cool because you're a skier, you need to check yourself because it's a nerdy, ridiculous, anyway, whatever. And Shane was like the epitome of that. And I remember just loving Saucer Boy. And then Saucer Boy would be like contrasted with some nutty line that Shane would, whatever. It was awesome. It was, he was an innovator and I loved that he could goof around and like being invited to the Payne McClonky Invitational was like literally a career highlight for me. And being on the podium there was another career highlight. And it's a special, special space and competition. It's so fun. And it should be fun. And it's lovely that Sherry is creating a space that literally is like built around that word, fun. It's awesome. And I love that. And I love that I got to meet Sherry through that. Well, I guess I met Sherry in South America, but anything for her, anything for the Shane McConkey Foundation. It was such an honor and so much fun. It's ridiculous.
So that event is coming up. Actually, when this podcast comes out, it'll probably be over. And then there'll be a podcast that I do from the McConkey, which will always be great because there's a ton of different Shane stories, which I'm always excited to tell. But at this point, we've been going pretty long, and I was going to talk about the Pretty Faces movie, and I was going to talk about Rachel the realtor that everybody can buy a house from, and all the different ups and downs that have gone from maybe 2014 on in your career. And it's mainly not ups and downs. It's just kind of been some years there's more projects and other years there's less projects. We're not going to talk about all those. The last thing I'm really going to touch on is you've been a mentor lately. And a lot of the things that you've done in skiing is to be sure that women are seen, heard, and everybody knows that women are badass because you are. And how does this mentorship kind of program tie into all of that?
You know, a lot of people have asked me, even early on with my earliest interviews, you know, like, hey, what are your goals in skiing? And truly, I've said from the very beginning, one of my goals is to inspire the next generation, period. Even when I was like young 20s, I hoped that I'd be standing on top of a cliff and just get shown up by another girl. Like I wanted the next girls in films to just make my shit look absolutely pathetic, you know? And I'm dead serious about that. And I am so thrilled to say that like that is fully wholeheartedly happening. And it's so exciting to watch. The performance difference between men and women is completely blurred now. You can't tell if there's a girl skiing or a guy skiing or snowboarding or it's just so freaking rad. And
it's
like
amazing.
The girls are getting after it. There's more women out there. It's all a game of numbers. The more girls are out there, the more girls are going to be fostering healthy competition between each other. And that healthy competition makes you raise the bar. Like when you have a bunch of girls skiing together, hitting things together, like all the time, even if it's just like a little like mogul, like you're hitting it, sessioning it, whatever. One girl does one thing, next thing girl does another thing, blah, blah, blah. Like people are pushing it as long as there's a bunch of girls, you know, and forever there just wasn't. And like the fact that that's changed and I've been able to help with that a little bit, man, I just feel like goal accomplished. Like, boom. I am so stoked that I don't know if I played big part, little part, doesn't matter. Like if I played a part in progressing women skiing or giving someone younger someone to look up to or maybe something to try or like, oh, you see it, you believe it. Like someone saw me do something and then they're like, I could do that, you know? That's what it's all about. And it's been really, really exciting to watch my career kind of turn into this, like, I'm the old one that gets invited now. Like, oh, Rich, we're going to do this piece where you're retiring, you're passing on the torch, you know, like you're retiring from your ski career and fostering new ski careers and young girls. And I'm like, hell yeah, man, that is like a dream come true. I get a call like that, like, hey, we want to do this piece. I don't even wait for the pitch. I'm like, hell yeah. Like, fuck yeah, let's go, you know? So, and I was able to do a really cool piece. It was a collaboration between Mountain Hardwear and Free Skier. Last year, Mountain Hardwear was like, hey, we want to do a piece on Rachael because she's our like kind of new athlete, and we want to tell a story with her, and a collaboration between Free Skier and Mountain Hardwear. And I kind of got on the phone to talk about what they wanted to do, and I came up with the idea of just saying, hey, like, would you be open to me trying to gather as many girls together as I possibly can, and just getting a camera on as many girls, like just feeding off of each other and hitting things. And like, there's so many girls at Alta that shred like daily. Like, I see girls get inverted every single day at Alta. It's fucking awesome, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And luckily Mountain Hardwear was cool enough to say, yeah, hell yeah, like, bring it on. It doesn't have to all be about you. That's not very organic. Let's do it. So we did this awesome piece, and all these fucking amazing girls came and showed up, and we were like sessioning airs and hitting things like back to back to back to back, like big, huge trains of, it was a powerful day. And then we went over to Rocky Point, which I've like 18 years of shooting and filming back there. And it was like the first time for some of these girls, which was like a dream come true, like to be able to show the girls all the airs and like, this is what you do here. And this is a fun way to hit this, and blah, blah, blah. And they were all like, hell yeah. And everyone sent it. And then at the end of the day, Tanner McCanns and Piper Knust were like, you know what, Burks, dude, I think we want to do double backflips off of C-frame. And I was like, hell yeah, you know, I've never done a double backflip, let alone off a cliff. And so it was amazing that we were able to, like, because of this day, we were able to get cameras on these two girls. And I'm pretty confident that that was the very first time ever that a girl did a double backy off of a cliff, like a natural cliff. And it wasn't just one, it was two girls. Like, this wasn't a lip, it wasn't a feature, it wasn't built. This was literally just a cliff, and they both did double backies off of it. And I think we made history that day. And I cried at the bar that day. I was like, I'm done. This is the best day of my life.
That's so
because
awesome.
It is. That's the best thing I could have ever done. So I'm so stoked with what's happened with my career. And I love to be kind of like the old gal that's like showing some of the young whippersnappers the ropes, you know?
Well, they couldn't have a more stoked and awesome person to do it. And that's what you need, is someone as stoked as you to really get people fired up. And at this point in the show, I have something called Inappropriate Questions. And this is the part where I get someone that you know to ask 3 questions, and they can be anything. I was able to line up one of your best friends for this one, a guy who once inspired you by saying, hey, Rachael, if you get some real gear, you could be pretty good at the skiing thing. And I'm talking about the legendary airman, Julian Carr. And are you ready for question number 1 from Julian?
Sure.
Okay, Rach, number 1. Back in your OG Cottonwood Heights house, who did you live there with, and what's one of the wildest stories from that house and era in general?
That's the Casa de Shrednar. And I'll say, when we moved into the Casa de Shrednar, I had a 3-story 4-man hitter beer bong that we initially, like, we walked up to the roof to take the 3-story 4-man hitter beer bong, and we ended up realizing that there were these amazing bushes all around the house. We hadn't even, like, moved our furniture in, and we proceeded to have the most impressive, like, bush diving session ever. And so much so that there wasn't one remaining bush after that day. Like, we hadn't even freaking moved into the house, and we had taken up every bit of powder that you could like the bush powder, like a good area of the bush where you can land in and not like hurt yourself, you know?
Yep.
We just dove off the roof for hours. It was awesome. We all woke up with like bug bites and like scratches, and we also teed a ball through a window once, and I pushed Cody Barnhill down the stairs with roller skates and a helmet on through the wall.
Like the Kool-Aid Man?
Yes.
That is incredible. Yes. And
yeah.
When you have a 3-story beer bong, because that's got to take about 6 beers, 7 beers, when someone gets that all down, does the stomach hold it, or does it shoot right back out?
Dude, we have so many photos of people projectile vomiting after taking that beer bong. Oh, it's so epic. Oh, man, that was our study break. Like, hey, just stop by the 3-story 4-man hitter before you go study tonight. This is the best era of bad decisions. It was awesome. Actually, I've had a lot of eras of bad decisions.
All right, we're going to jump into your next inappropriate question.
All right, Rach. Are you more proud of which accomplishment? A, you can speak fluent French, which is impressive. B, I know that you took the ranks as one of the most successful AK boats for a couple summers on what you yielded fishing in Alaska. And that to me is also super impressive because I know it's competitive, I know it's hard work, and I know you guys are one of the most successful boats. C, organizing 15 years of the Billy Poole Foundation events with his family, obviously in Montana, and I think I've been there for 12 or 13 of them. So thank you for organizing those.
Nothing inappropriate at all there, Julian. So what are you most proud of?
C.
Yeah, I think that's an easy question. And what's the funniest story or funniest thing that's happened at one of these Billy Poole events? Because there's got to be something inappropriate or funny that's happened there.
Well, I got kind of choked up just then because it's been 15 years of that was a lot of work. And we had the most successful one ever this year. It was so awesome. But lots of crazy inappropriate things happen. Not so much with the kids, but after the kids go home. We lube up a frozen turkey and see who can throw it the furthest. And we've done that for 15 years in a row. And it's the annual Billy Poole frozen turkey toss. And I literally have organized 15 straight years of that. We did it at his funeral in Missoula, Montana. And we had his, dead serious. I stood up at the dinner in front of everybody and said, I know this sounds weird, but we've been grieving for a really long time. And I thought it'd be really fun to do something really odd. And I have a frozen turkey and some lube, and we're going to lube up a frozen turkey in the back alley and see who can throw it the furthest if anyone wants to go do that. We had Billy's grandpa throwing the frozen turkey, and so literally we did that at his funeral, and we've done it every single year since then. The award, it's a very prestigious, it's almost up there with winning a Little Mountain competition at the Payne McConkey is to be the champ of the frozen turkey toss for an entire year. So that's a big one.
That is incredible. And now we are going to go into your final inappropriate question.
You come from a family of badasses, that's for sure. So if you can briefly summarize your parents, your brother, and from that, obviously, do you ever feel pressure on your career path? I guess perhaps from expectations that maybe they're happy with the course you're on, or they would have liked maybe a different one, or have nudged you in different directions. How have you dealt with that in your life?
The reason that he asks me that is because he's known me since I was 13 years old, and he knows that there's a lot of pressure from my parents, and it's all great pressure. They want me to do well, blah, blah, blah. And I think that the unconventional path that my career has taken many, many, many years to be something that my parents are really proud of, if you will. And we're a super tight-knit family. My mom and dad, or my dad, there were probably 5 years straight where dad would tag Julian Carr in his posts because he loves talking trash to Julian. Julian came over and watched football with us for years. He'd just show up and we'd watch football, dad, Julian and I, and that was kind of part of growing up. I don't know, Julian's just, he knows how tight I am with my folks, but also that I've got a brother that's a PhD in chemistry and is now CEO of a startup company and has an MBA on the side. And my dad's an orthopedic surgeon. He's world-renowned orthopedic surgeon that's still working his ass off. You know what I mean? My mom is a speech pathologist. And then I'm a skier. So he's watched me struggle with dad not be so stoked that I was still skiing and stuff. So that's a very valid question. And I think that they, I'm sure that they would have liked for me to do something different, but I've definitely come to grips with, I love what I do. I'm very proud of my career, and I think that my mom and dad are very proud too. And it took a little while, but I think that they're really proud and stoked for me. My dad's skiing more than he ever has. It's pretty awesome. So,
and I would think that while they all have great careers on paper and through schooling and all that, more people globally know who Rachael Burks is because of the impact that you've had on people's lives based on your skiing. And there's a lot to be said for that. And it might not all be monetary, especially in the ski industry, but it's pretty rad that you've had an impact on so many people's lives. And that's Inappropriate Questions, and that's our podcast. And when I look at your career, it's one of those that's wild to me because you didn't get passionate about skiing until you were drinking age almost.
Literally.
Yeah, I'm imagining that before you really got into it, you're all gaper dayed out in weird gear and you were a sight to see on the mountains. And then you moved to Texas, and that's the best thing you could possibly ever do because it made you realize that you love the mountains. And with the way that you hustled, doing all the dirty work and making shit happen and your no fear attitude, all you needed to do was meet the right people to push you. And you found them in Billy and Julian. And once they kind of pointed you and aimed you, you're on a path to success. And nothing was given to you in skiing. And that's why your story is so awesome. because while your pro ski dreams came late, you made them happen, and I thank you for sharing your story, and that is our podcast.
Holy shit. Thank you. That was fucking nuts. I feel like I just like took drugs or something like that, or like went hyperdrive in Star Wars. Like I went hyperspace to a completely different galaxy with you for a second there, bud.
That's where I want you to be. Perfect.
If you had seen my face, I literally was just, my jaw was agape. I cannot believe all the research that you put into that. But I mean, wow. Mike, that was amazing. I really appreciate that. That means that you took a fucking shit ton of time to figure this thing out. And that's the hugest compliment in the world. That was amazing. You moved through my whole career. I'm like kind of emotional. Thank you for doing that. Most podcasts that I do, my feedback afterwards from the people that have done the podcast is like, hey, we really appreciated you just kind of like taking a question and rolling with it. So I'm used to just kind of like talking, you know, like no one's ever done that. No one's ever prepared that much or done even like a tenth of the research that you just put into that. Thank you so much.
So that was time with Rachael Burks, and what an inspiration she is to everyone. I'm inspired by Rachel's can-do, super positive attitude. I've known Burks for like 15 years, and while I don't see her a lot, every time I do see her, it's like a fire is lit inside of me that makes me want to ski harder or party harder or do whatever I'm doing as close to the level that Rachael is doing it, because she is so awesome and she's having more fun than everyone else. But that's what's so cool and sometimes unfortunate about how Rachael treated her career. The unfortunate part is that she sucked at the business element of being a pro athlete. I mean, if you ask her hero, Seth Morrison, I'd guess he'd think she wasn't a full-on pro skier because she wasn't able to only ski. She had other jobs. And Seth had mentioned to me before, I think we were talking about Dan Treadway or someone like that, and he mentioned that that guy wasn't a full-on pro because he painted houses in the summer. And you can't be a full-on pro unless you can pay your bills by your sponsors' paychecks and nothing else. But whatever. I don't think that, and Rachael is pro to me, and the element that she's best at isn't going huge, but she does that. The element she's best at is being the catalyst that pushes other women to go even bigger and blur the lines between the sexes when it comes to skiing. That's happening right now in the sport, and it's so amazing to watch. That's the podcast for this week. If all goes as planned, you're going to get some great Shane McConkey stories in next week's show. For now, I want you to please subscribe wherever you listen, and please, please, please support my amazing sponsors who make the show happen. They are Elon Skis, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Best Day Brewing, and Stanley. Have a great week, everyone.